eventually, the war did end, and people were allowed to go home. When they went home, they were given, anyone who was still in the camp was given $25 to make the journey back to California or wherever they were from. And although they got to go home, it was still not easy. They faced still lots of prejudice. Lots of people had, their businesses were gone, they had no homes to return to. This is an example of a trailer camp where people lived until they could find a community that would accept them. And these are headlines from local papers that show the kind of prejudice that was going on. Shots are fired into the home of 2 Japs at Cortez. Cortez is 10 miles from here. Livingston Jap's home is fired on a 3rd time. So of course Jap is a very racist, derogatory term, but they're letting them at that time be used in public newspapers. So my dad's going to tell you a little story about what happened to his family when they came back from the.
I was in the military at this time, and my brother was also in the service. So we were both in the service, and my folks came back in, I think, either April of 1945. And so after they had shortly come back, there were other people living with them because there wasn't much housing. And so one night they had been on the bed, and there was a shooting that went on, and they shot into our house. Even to this day in our house that we grew up in, there are 3 bullet holes. One that went through the wall, broke the chandelier, and lodged in the wall where my sister was sleeping, right above where she was sleeping. Another went down low, went into the sofa on which some people were sitting. So it was a very close shave. Also, I had a friend that talks about where he was staying was also shot by unknown people, and he decided that with his friend that they would, they called the sheriff out. The sheriff told them, well, you guys aren't wanted, so you have to expect this. But if you should catch them, we will arrest them. This is what the sheriff said. And so they went out and bought a motorcycle and thought they could maybe catch these guys if they're shooting again. And so they had this motorcycle all ready to go, but they were very fortunate that nobody came back to shoot again because they didn't have any weapons at all, and they were going to chase these people that came to shoot their house with weapons. So that's the story.
Sorry. It took, really 40 years after the war, before things, okay. This is a picture. This is my grandmother, my dad's mother. In 1954, she was finally able to become a citizen. She came in 1918, but because of all of the laws, that said you couldn't become a citizen, and then the internment, the Issei had to wait until, she had to wait 35 years, but she was still very anxious to become a part of the America. Redress. Redress means to repair or to pay back. So it took about 40 years before any action was finally taken by any of the people who had been incarcerated and their children to look into repairing or doing something about the damage that had been done. In the 1970s, the JAC, which we're part of, and other organizations started looking into and asking the government to look into what actually went on and whether there was any wrongdoing by the Japanese people. And what they found was, of course, there wasn't. They held hearings in, I think, 20 cities for 9 days, and at that point, it was the first time that the story of the incarceration of Japanese Americans really came out. When they did these studies, they finally they published this, there was a government commission, and they published a report, and what the report said was basically that unlike what President Roosevelt had said, which he said it was a military necessity for the safety of the United States that people be incarcerated. And what they found was that there was really no military necessity. It was really prejudice and fear and poor government leadership, and that's what the report said, that caused the incarceration. So from that, eventually, redress, which means the government, you have the opportunity, because of our Constitution, to ask the government to look at what they've done and to see if they've actually made a mistake, which you can't do in every country. And so they finally came to the conclusion that yes, the United States had made a gigantic mistake. And so they decided to pay $20,000 to every surviving incarceree, and most importantly, to give a letter of apology, a national apology, saying, yes, we made a mistake, you didn't do it. And that I think for all of the Nisei and the few surviving Issei was the most important thing. So, the important thing about redress are a couple things. One is that the Constitution eventually did work. People did have the right to redress, and they used it, which means they have the right to go to the government and say, we feel you've made a mistake and you need to look at that. And the government was willing to do that. And the second thing was that it pointed out really clearly that when there is prejudice and when there is crisis, people and governments can make really bad choices. So those choices can be based, and you can look at it, and you probably have with Mrs. Stark. Governments start making choices based on prejudice and fear rather than what's written in the Constitution. And so our hope is that for you and for all of us, that we have to stay awake to that, because otherwise things happen. We have to be responsible for all of those things. And our hope is that you, as the upcoming adults who will be our leaders, will take up that, because when you do, you really will make a difference, and that's important, and we want you to have a better world. So,
amen.
So we have a few
We do.
minutes. If you have any questions.
This is your time to ask. They have the list, but it would be better if you just raised your hand and asked the questions. And Mrs. Street's class, feel free to ask also. By the way, that's Mr. Marocchino, principal.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. I do want to dedicate this time to our students here to ask questions. I think this will be a little bit time for them to everything that they want to find out.
Guys?
Here's one that I see written. Were
Go.
family traditions allowed to be done? Could you still keep your family traditions in the camp?
Family traditions sort of went out the door, I guess, in the camp, because most of us who were young hung around with our friends, and this was whatever we did. We hung around with our friends. Even going to eat, we no longer ate with the family. We went out and ate with our friends, and we looked for the mess hall that had the best food, and we heard that had the best food. So those things happened. So the family tradition really fell apart when we were put into the camps.
I have a question. Since you guys were still dating, were you in the same camp? Oh, so did you keep date? You were able to keep dating for that year and a half or so?
Yes, we were.
Oh, that must have been pretty strange.
I could tell the best story, but I won't.
I bet you won't. You'll never live it down. Guys, any questions? You had a million. Felix.
What did you take? Because you can only carry
What could you take? What did you take?
You personally.
What you could carry? What did you take?
That's sort of an interesting thing that you asked me, because some of us were farmers, okay? In fact, all of our people were farmers, and we had trucks. And so, in spite of the fact that they said you could only take what you can carry, which became very difficult, we were able to take other things besides. So we took whatever we could. We put them in the truck, and they accepted it all. But
Oh.
we don't talk about this very much, because the order was that you could only take what you can carry. Okay, and they specified what you had.
I had never heard that had happened.
Well, that happened.
For some people.
Okay,
They
but
were
I mean,
lucky.
For
very
few
lucky.
people. We
Yeah.
were very fortunate that we were able to do that.
How long were you guys in Merced?
We were there from, I'll tell you about the May the 13th. We had to go, the last day that they told us that we could go to Merced was May the 13th, 1942. May the 13th, 1942 was my 17th birthday. So I remember it very vividly. But, what was the question again?
How long were you at?
Oh, yeah, we were there from May the 13th, we were there until September. And most of the people.
Oh, summer.
It lasted until October, But by the end of September, most of the people had been moved out of the assembly centers into the permanent relocation camps.
I saw a couple of other hands. Yes. I don't know your name. Sorry.
Did you, because I saw a picture of a house, did you used to live in this wooden looking shack around here, over there in the little corner?
Your house?
Their house.
On all.
Are you asking about?
Yeah,
It's-
that wasn't their house.
No?
But they do live, the house is still there.
Kiyono, you live in it, right?
I still
Kiyono's
live in the
house.
house that he
Yeah.
lived in at that
Right.
time, yeah.
And I was, when I had her daughter in 5th grade, which I mean, it seems like it was yesterday, they invited me over for coffee. It was Christmas time. And her daughter, who's now, 35 in Kiyono, showed me the bullet holes. And that was the first I knew the connection of Livingston, because remember, I'm not from here either. So it was special to me because I grew up in, as I told you guys, with mostly Japanese friends in the Bay Area. And my friends' parents were like your folks, didn't talk much, and we were told not to ask, and the kids knew very little. So I was really fascinated when you shared that with me, because I didn't know anything about that. And that was like 25 years ago, Kiyono. So, excellent question.
So that shack is like around here, right?
I don't know, the photograph that you
I'm
have?
not sure where which.
Does it look
photograph
familiar
was
to you?
Yeah, I remember seeing them over there.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the same one.
Ida.
Okay, just a quick information for all of you. The Livingston Museum has an excellent Yamato Colony exhibit. They're open every Sunday from 2 till 4. It touches on when Yamato Colony was formed. It also
You have to go
touches on
quietly
the
out that
camps
way.
and highlights different people in the community.